are. And we have none other than the Rice family here. The two people that I grew up the street from. And there's a lot of us kids appreciate both of you guys for the various things that you have done for us personally and as a community. And that's the reason why I needed to interview you both, is because, I knew you as the band teacher. And then later in life, you came to Lowell schools and you taught too. So, we got a 2-for-1. And you always lived in that cool Victorian house that was painted green and white. And always flew the state flag. That's so cool. I always admired that. I always admired that you were always a good neighbor to the family that lived next door for 100 years. Their last name escapes me for right now, but you guys shared the same driveway. And I thought, the Crispins, yes. Mm-hmm. And I always thought, oh my gosh, that would be a fight between us because we've got so many cars around here. And you guys never seem to have a problem with the Crispins. They never had a bad word to say about you guys. So let's start from the beginning, though. So where did you grow up at, Mr. Rice? Bob Rice, please.
Okay, I grew up in Mount Morris, Michigan. I was born in Flint, and when we were a year old, we moved to Mount Morris, which is about 10 miles north of Flint, and that's where we lived, until my father passed away in 1997.
What did your father do then?
My father was worked in the Buick. He was a painter. He painted cars in the Buick for 42 years before he retired. Yep. He went in right out of high school, and then he went in the Army during World War II, and then came back, went right back into the General Motors, and he painted cars for a living.
Wow. So he was working out of Flint, because it wasn't that General Motors headquarters.
Correct.
There.
Right.
So what brought you to, okay, wait a minute. I don't want to know how you got to Lowell yet. Okay, so you went to Flint schools, and then you went...
No, I went to Mount Morris schools.
Mount Morris schools, and then you went to college.
Yeah, at Michigan State.
No, okay, so this is the deal. How did you get to Michigan State? What was the big appeal?
Well, I have an older brother who is a musician. And he went to Michigan State and played snare drum in the Michigan State marching band, plus he was in the concert bands. And I really liked it. When I was in high school, I used to go down to the rehearsals, drive down to East Lansing, and I'd go to the games. They used to sell tickets for $10 to high school kids. You came in with your high school ID and you got it sit in the end zone for $10. So I used to go to the football games at Michigan State. I was a lot skinnier when I was in high school, and I was actually a track runner, and so Central Michigan offered me an athletic scholarship to come there and run track for them. And I almost went, except I really wanted to be in the marching band, and I was thinking about majoring in music. So I went to Michigan State to be in the band, and I went there. I was a hotshot high school trumpet player. And so I wanted to play professionally. I thought I was going to be a professional trumpet player. So I went to Michigan State as a playing major, and found out that practicing 8 hours a day, I didn't like it. Okay? And I did it for a while, but I did that, and I also did a study myself with professional trumpet jobs, and found out, number one, when a job opened up, which didn't open up very often, they were like 150 trumpet players would show up for the auditions, okay? And I just didn't want all that stress, number one. And number two, I'd be going all around the country and everything. My wife and I went to high school together. Her father was the football coach at our high school. And so we didn't date or anything, okay? Yeah, she dated the football players. Okay, but at any rate, right before we graduated, we kind of got together and started to see each other, and then right after we graduated, we started dating. And the funny thing is her dad played football at Michigan State, Okay, he was a
I was
he was a
literally
football
born
player.
there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were
Yes.
literally
I
born
was
there.
I was
was
born at
born
St.
while he was
Lawrence.
playing
It was
football
his
there.
senior year, and I tell everybody this. My birth announcement was in the sports page. I mean, for real. My mother still has it, so I'm going to get that from her and kind of frame it, and it'll be something to pass on to
yeah.
our kids. So
We would like to have a copy of that sent to us. So,
the copy
take a
of
picture of it.
oh, I can do that. We're going there tomorrow.
Okay,
to my
that'd be
mom's.
great.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so then we found out that when we got assigned to dorms, we ended up in the same dorm.
Really?
So
Opposite sides.
so that's
because
no.
boys and
So-
girls could not
So
be
that was
Right.
kind of a big deal for us starting with dating and everything. We were right there together and everything. So, anyways, that's how I ended up at Michigan State.
Wow. So, what was when you were interviewing or trying to get? Was that a band that you were trying to get into? What was the music that you said? I showed up and there was 50 other trumpet players.
Oh no, these were different trumpet jobs.
What are
you know,
trumpet jobs then?
Well, for instance, playing in the Boston Symphony or playing in the Detroit Symphony, or things like that. Mostly were the jobs I was looking for, professional trumpet jobs, playing in these different organizations. I just decided I didn't want to do that. So at that point, I decided if I'm not going to play, then what do I want to do with my music degree? And I said I wanted to go teach. And so I switched over to the education department and taking all my courses there to get my teaching degree.
So where did you, so because I'm trying to put you two together and I'm trying to figure out where did you teach first at? Was it, you didn't come straight to Lowell?
I student taught in Flint schools.
Oh.
Okay. Which was another experience. Student teaching in a big city school. But anyways, and when I was getting ready to graduate, I went in to see my college band director, Ken Bloomquist, and he actually called me in there and he said, I just got a call from Notre Dame University, and they have a graduate assistantship open, and they want a trumpet player in there. And he said, if you would like to do it, I would like to recommend you. And at that point, we had gotten married. We got married just before our junior year in college, and we had our son. And so I looked at him and said, I've been living on almost no money because I was teaching private lessons at a couple of different schools, and I was teaching a drum and bugle corps, okay, to make money for us to live on. And I just said, I'm tired of living on $2,000 a year, $3,000 a year, and I need to get a real job. And so I said, no, thank you. I don't want to do that. And the funny thing is, had I taken that graduate assistantship job and got that, of course, then I would have been the marching band director in the movie Rudy. When they show the actual footage, that was the year I would have been there. And they show this guy up directing the band at an actual game.
Yeah.
And I said, I would have been in the movies. But at any rate, he then called me the next day and said, I found you an interview at a little school over here called Potterville, which is over near Charlotte. In fact, I think Saranac plays Potterville now in sports. And so I interviewed for the job. And the funny thing was, when I interviewed, there were 4 of us at Michigan State. We all went and interviewed. And I was the last one to interview. And so I knew the other 3 guys very well. We were all good friends. And I went in to interview with the superintendent because they were also interviewing for a high school principal at that time. And he really liked me because my father worked in the Buick. And the reason being, he said, was the majority of the parents in Potterville at that time worked in the Oldsmobile plant in Lansing. Mm-hmm. And he thought I would understand their backgrounds. And so he offered me the job. And the funny thing was, he said to me, well, I think I'd like to offer you the job. And without even thinking, I looked back at him and said, well, I think I might want to take the job. And then I thought about that later. I'm going, what a dummy. talking. But anyways, we laughed, and I signed a contract for $7,000 my first year teaching.
You were rolling in the money.
And I taught at
Yeah, we thought we
Potterville,
were, yeah.
okay? And
Yeah.
just to end that story kind of quickly, I taught there for 1 year, and at the end of that year, I had a disagreement with the high school principal on the registration of kids for classes. He decided he wanted all the kids to go in like a college into a room and pick their classes and everything. Well, it was a small school. So he put government, which was a senior class requirement in the state of Michigan, the same hour as my band. I had taken the band to festival, and for the first time in 12 years, they got a 1, got a first division, and I had the whole band come. I had 3 seniors, and they were like my 3rd chair flute, my 2nd chair percussion, and a saxophone player. That was it. Everybody else were all underclassmen, and they were all going to take band. And she went back to school because we were living 15 minutes from campus. And so she had 1 more year of school to graduate. And so I was going to stay there so she could finish school. But at that point, almost all my first year players all came in. They were all juniors going into senior year and said, Mr. Rice, I can't take band next year. Well, I went in to see the principal, and we talked for quite a while. And I said, you've just got to change this, you know. And he looked at me and he said, I think it's too late to change. And I looked at him and said, I don't think it's too late for me to change. I got in my car and I drove straight to Michigan State University and went right into Mr. Bloomquist's office, my band director, college band director, and I said, I want another job and I don't care where it is, but I need to get out of here. I was young, I was idiot, frankly, as most 23-year-olds are. Okay, and
But you had
I wanted to get out.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he said, I just got a call from this place on the west side of the state looking for a band director. He said, would you be interested in interviewing at a place called Lowell? Well, I had driven through Lowell when I was in high school. Otherwise, the only place I stopped was A&W on the edge of town back then.
I know, it's like a town,
Okay,
yeah.
and so I just said, well, I know where it is, but okay, I'll go. Well, it turns out Lowell and Mount Morris, where I went to high school, were pretty much the same size. They were both Class B schools and had within 100 students, the same number of students and stuff. And I really liked it when I interviewed here, and I was told that there were 37 or 38 people that interviewed for the job. And I interviewed, and I got called back for a second interview with the superintendent, Sinke. I can't think of his first name. Anyway, Leonard Sinke was superintendent then, and so I got called back. Well, you know, I got to say this one thing. When I got into the second interview, one of the first questions they asked me was, if you're the band director here, will you have the band in the annual Christmas parade? And I'm thinking to myself, this is a trick question. I don't understand why they would ask me that. And so I said, well, sure I would. It's our own Christmas parade. Well, I found out later that Bill Mills, the guy that was there before me, the band director, was upset with the city council because they didn't invite the band. They just expected the band to show up. And so he got mad at his last year there and just didn't bring the band to the parade. And so all of a sudden, he was the Christmas parade, and the high school band was supposed to lead Santa Claus down the street, and the high school band didn't show up. And so the superintendent called Bill. He was at his apartment, and he said, "Where are you?" And he says, "I'm sitting here watching football." Okay, well, you're supposed to be here. He says, "No, I wasn't invited." So that was that. So, anyways, I answered that question correctly, I guess.
Thank you.
And I got the job, and I walked out the door. I signed. No, actually, I hadn't signed the contract yet. But I walked out the door, and who's sitting in the office but the Methodist minister, waiting to ask me if I'd be willing to be the choir director at the Methodist church.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And first of all, I I had choir my very first year of teaching, and it was not my favorite class. That was it. That 1 year, and that was it. Never had a choir after that. But and I looked at him. I said, "Well, I'm Catholic, and I just don't think I can do that." Which was great because it got me out of that job.
Right.
But anyways, that's how I ended up here.
That's how you got to Lowell.
And I signed a contract and everything, and I got ready. I came to the summer music program here in Lowell, and principal came down to see me, and he said, the superintendent just called me, and he said, "You never filled out an application." I just came and interviewed,
Right.
and then they got the job, and I never filled out it. He says, "We have to have that in our files. So could you go over to the central office and fill out an application?"
Fill out that
I'd been
paperwork.
teaching for a week and a
Yeah,
half.
it had to be on file. Yeah.
Just a real funny story. My first week of band camp, I'm out there, and we had a field between the old high school and Bushnell Elementary where we practiced. Okay, and so I'm out there practicing, and all of a sudden, here comes, I noticed out of the corner of my eye, here comes this person running towards our field. And it was turned out to be the girl that worked as a secretary's helper in the office. And she came running out to me, and she said, "Mr. Rice, John so-and-so," and I don't remember his last name, "has to get home. The cows are out, they're all over the road, and nobody can get him back in but him. And so
Yeah.
I've got to have it, he's got to leave right now." And I said, "Okay." And then as this John is walking back to the band room and put his stuff away and go home, I'm thinking about, what did I get into here? Because obviously I was not a farmer.
And farming was not a big thing where you grew up at. So it was a
Yes,
thing
actually it
among-
was.
was,
My
but
father
it-
lived on a farm
yeah,
before
but not
when he was
Flint.
in high school. My father lived on a farm, and my grandfather farmed it, but he didn't like it, and neither did my dad. And my grandfather ended up being a carpenter, repairing furniture and making furniture. So he ended up selling that and moving into Flint. They lived on the outskirts of Flint at that time in this farm. And where his farm was, where my father was brought up, is now a junior high school. They bought the land. It's actually right where the farmhouse was, is now Ainsworth Junior High. It was a high school, but now it's the junior high. So my dad was a farmer. I never was, but
So you never had to go chase cows.
I actually did when I got to Lowell.
Okay.
We went to get a house, and we ended up renting a farmhouse from the Wisner family out on 4 Mile.
Yeah.
Okay? And I got to know Dave Wisner, who graduated in 72, I think. So we got to be good friends and everything. And so we didn't have, a lot of money. Lanie was finishing up school and all this stuff. And so I would go out and hay on the summertime, and then Mr. Wisner, in order to pay us, would just bring me over his house and open up his freezer, and he'd have all this steaks and all stuff like that, and he'd say, "Take whatever meat you want." And then
milk.
for milk, I'd
You
go
get
over in the
milk.
morning,
Just
and he'd
to-
give me a big pitcher, and
Yeah, we bring it back to the
they weren't
house.
supposed to do this,
Yeah.
but they let us
Yeah.
just dip
Oh,
the
yeah.
pitcher in and bring a pitcher of milk home. So I got food and drink from him, So they called me one night, and they needed help delivering a calf. So at 1 o'clock in the morning, I get up, get dressed, and go over there, and I am out in the field helping Dave Wisner deliver a calf, which was really kind of neat. My son was very small. When we came here, he was 3 years old. And when he was like 4 or 5, we took him over, and he got to milk a cow.
Yeah.
He to this day still
And
thinks
even
that's
I did
one of
too.
the neater
I mean,
things
just-
he ever got
yeah.
to do is go to the Wisner farm and milk a cow.
Yeah.
How beautiful.
When
Yes.
just
I'm sorry.
I want
No, you're fine. Just keep it.
I think the second time, the second interview that he had, I went with him. We took Bobby,
Yeah.
and I just remember coming off the freeway, because the freeway, was there. And and if you know the other side of the state, the east side, it's, like this. And so we're getting, and I'm looking around going, oh my gosh. And then you look out and you see that skyline. We all do when we come into town, it's still beautiful. looking, and so I'm thinking to myself, this would be a wonderful place to raise a family. I mean, in my brain, I'm going, I think I'd like, to raise our kids here. That was the first thought in my head
I
before
wanted
we
to
got
tell
to
you
town.
two things in college. When I was at Michigan State, I was lucky enough. I was first chair trumpet player in the marching band. Okay, and so I was in a brass choir at Michigan State, and Dave Brubeck came into town for 4 days, and he had written a cantata, and so it was for choir and brass choir, and so they asked a bunch of us to play. So I got to rehearse with Dave Brubeck and his trio for 4 days, and then do a premiere performance. That was a lot of fun, because every time there'd be a break, Dave Brubeck and his band would just sit around and play. And so we'd all be up there around the piano and all this stuff with these guys playing, and it was just a lot of fun. And the other one thing was our band director, Kenneth Bloomquist, was very good friends with Al Hurt. And so Al Hurt was on tour, and he came by and actually came out and played on a halftime show with us at a football game, and then he did a concert that night, and the marching band came on stage and played the first half, and then he came out with his group and played second half. So when we got there, because I was the first chair trumpet player, I got to go into his dressing room with him. So I got to sit down, and I had about a 10-minute talk with Al Hurt, and that was a lot of fun.
Cool.
I always thought he was nobody. Okay, he was not one of the people I adored or anything like that. And I got to talk to him. He was very sick. In fact, he left Michigan State and went back to New Orleans and went right in the hospital. He was that sick. But because he and Ken were good buddies, he decided he would play this concert first. And so I'm in his thing, and he's coughing, and he's having all this trouble breathing and all this stuff. He came out that night, and now I'm a pretty good player, and we sat in the front row in the band for that half the concert. I did not hear one wrong note in that performance. And he just really, he got me at that point. I'm sitting here going, I thought this guy was just a nobody, and he was really good.
And you're talking about Mr. Al Hurt.
Yeah.
Wow, and he didn't miss a note. And as sick as he was.
Yep. And so it was funny. He and his drummer were both real ill. They had, I can't remember what they had, but they had some kind of a sickness at that time. And they both ended up in the hospital in New Orleans. As soon as they left Michigan State, they flew right back home. So yeah, those two things, that really helped me out. I had not heard a lot of professional playing when I was young. Heard very good playing, but I didn't hear professional, what I called professional. And I got to do those two things in college, and that was a lot of fun.
So what music inspires you today, as far as you're thinking, God, that sounds good. I want to pick up that trumpet.
Well, I'm a big fan of big band music. I
big
play.
band music,
Yeah, I
okay.
play in a jazz band, big band, whatever you want to call it, in Hastings. We have a group there called the Thornapple Jazz Orchestra, and it's all just volunteer people. Nobody gets paid. We have 9 saxophones and 4 trombones and 4 trumpets, a piano, a bass guitar, and a drummer and a conductor. And I think there are 7 of us in the group who are were or are band directors. And then a bunch of people, mostly from Hastings, because the guy that runs the band is Joe LaJoy, and he was the high school band director in Hastings when I was in Lowell. He's retired now too, and very good jazz trumpet player. And so we just play a lot of stuff around Hastings, and we've gone to a few places. Every 2 or 3 years, they try to take a week-long trip in the summertime. 3 years ago, we went to up the UP. We did a
Tour.
A weeks-long tour through the UP, playing at places. I mean, places you never, like Lance. If you've never heard of that, well, we played in St. Ignace, and we played in Marquette, and we ended up in Escanaba. But it was a lot. It was a lot of fun, and not a lot of people show up. But you get 50 to 100 people come to your concert, and it was like, you know, they all really like it.
That's a lot of people.
You know,
It is.
so we play a lot of
Yeah,
old
it
big
is.
band stuff, and we play some newer stuff and a few some of the jazz stuff.
So who's your favorite music from? Like I grew up with listening to Tommy Dorsey, what have you. So who
Yeah,
do you start?
Tommy Dorsey's a big one.
Spike Jones? Did you like Spike Jones?
He was okay. He was not one of my favorites, but he was okay. Okay, but a lot of different things. There were, I did get to see a couple of the big bands when I was young. There was a place in Flint called the IMA Auditorium, and they used to bring in like 3 times a year. They'd bring in somebody, you know, one of the big band, Buddy Rich or some of those people, and my dad took me to one of them. Most of the time it was my mom and dad went because they would also have a dance, and they'd go there as a date, so to speak.
So did
And
so
everything.
did my
So,
mother.
Yeah.
Really?
The same, yeah.
Yeah, they would be
Yeah.
packed. The Flint IMA was a large auditorium, and it would be packed with people, and so they got to see a lot of big bands, you know, in the 50s and 60s, but mostly 50s. So that was a lot of fun. Geez, you know what? I don't know if I have a big favorite.
We have a lot of music at home
I mean,
from all genres.
when I was
seriously,
young, my mom and dad had
just
Tommy
tons.
Dorsey records, and they had a lot of different things like that and everything, and I really liked that.
Duke Ellington, and yeah.
Well, I remember when Boots Randolph came to Lowell Showboat, and my father made sure he took me to see him, and that always had a big impact on me because I remember we weren't living in Lowell at the time. I was a kid. We moved to Lowell in 5th grade, and my dad told me on the way there, he says, this guy, because I always loved the sound of that saxophone, and my dad said, he makes it sing. It's a different way he plays it, Tina. I want you to hear this. So when, like I said, when Boots Randolph, and I got his autograph, I have it somewhere, but I understand what you're saying here is that there's some sounds that just impact your heart and your soul for the, you know. Do you have a big...
Well, you know, when Pearl Bailey played at the Showboat,
Yeah.
I had a student teacher. His name was Wright McCarger. He now does a lot of stuff for Civic Theater in Grand Rapids. And he said, you know, he student taught in the spring, and so he said, let's put together a little jazz group and play and audition, because they were having amateur night auditions, you know, for the Showboat. So let's audition for the Showboat. And I said, okay, if you put it together, and this will be your project. Well, he couldn't find a first trumpet player, so I played trumpet. And he wrote 3 arrangements for this group, and it was sort of like a jazz band. We had some saxophones and trumpets and trombones, and he played piano, and I can't remember what else we had. Anyways, a drummer, of course. And so we auditioned and we got on. So we ended up performing for Pearl Bailey. We got to go out there. We didn't know what to wear, and he says, I'll take care of it. So the next thing I know, he shows up 2 nights before we're supposed to play on the Showboat with these purple tuxedos. Dark purple tuxedo. And he got a place in Grand Rapids that would let us use them. And at the time, I didn't know why they let us use them. And so we ended up riding on a flatbed truck in the Showboat parade and playing. And then that night, we were on the Showboat, and we get done playing. We got to play one piece because they only give you 4 minutes or 5 minutes. And we get done playing, and all of a sudden, Wright leaves the piano and goes up and grabs a microphone. And he does an ad for the Tuxedo Company.
Oh, wow!
And I found out that's why they let us use the
Yeah.
tuxedo. Well, I got called in. I got yelled at for that, you know. So, but he did that. We ended up, and it was neat because I got to meet her, and she was fantastic, of course. And so
Did you go out to dinner with her, or I heard
No,
that
no,
she
no, no, no. I just
went
got,
to the bar.
I got to meet her for a
She-
couple of
yeah, I
minutes
don't know.
and say
Yes,
hello,
yeah.
and then she went into her trailer. I mean, she asked me something, and I told her I was the high school band director there and stuff, and da, and then goodbye. Her husband opened up the door. She went in the trailer. That was it. So no, I didn't have a long conversation with her.
Maybe you can share some of your, since both of you were educators for Lowell, some of the highlights of your educating career with the Lowell students. I don't know if Bob wants to start.
I'll give you one quick story. We did a piece in our spring concert called the Midnight Fire Alarm one year. And it involved, it was a real fast beat, and everything. And then in the middle of it, the fire siren went off. So I got a crank siren. I borrowed one from a guy. And so all of a sudden, everything's fine. Well, at the end of the year, we had graduation, and I would let the seniors pick a piece to play at that they would like to play at graduation. Well, the seniors all picked this piece. And I didn't think anything of it. So here we are, we're down at the showboat playing, and we get up, we play our piece, and all of a sudden here goes, well, the next morning, I was Sunday, and on Monday morning, I get called in the office, and here's the chief of police and the head fireman. It was,
Was
Probably
our
Frank
neighbor?
Baker.
Baker.
Yeah.
That's it, Baker.
There we go. Okay.
Yes.
And here they are, and they were all upset because I'm down on the river, and we did a big fire alarm. The dang firemen all came to the fire station. And everybody thought there was a big something going on, and so I had to promise them that we would never do that piece outdoor again. We did it once again, but we did it inside, but not outdoors. So that's my story right there.
Well, one of the, to me, I'm sitting back as band directors' wives are a special breed. Okay.
Oh, so
And
tell us.
well, we sit back, but the support has to be constant. It has to be there all the time. And then when you're raising a family, he's got his job to do, and it's really important. So there's Monday night rehearsals, there's parades, there are after school activities, and then he played pep band for all the basketball games. Then all of that, and then getting stuff ready in the fall, getting uniforms. It's endless. And so we're band directors' wives are home. We're there doing our thing. But, and he knows that it was very, very seldom. We've been married 52 years now, but we've been together since 67, basically. Very few times that I missed, because I thought that was a very key component to have, that person there, me.
Definitely.
And our kids. Our kids, would be bouncing around, popping and something just because. It's just because. So
I thought of one more. I had another student teacher who wasn't real good, but he needed. It was in the winter term, so he needed an activity. So I gave him the basketball band that played at basketball games, and then I would go and I'd sit with different teachers and administrators stuff on the opposite side, and the band would be over with the student side and playing. And so they're doing one night, here they are, and I'm sitting here, and he played this piece, and he got lost in the music. And so he started conducting when it wasn't supposed to be conducted, and the band kind of fell apart. Okay? That was just a basketball game to me, but it was a big deal to some people. And he got really mad, and he yelled at them, and he used a profane word. And just as he did that, the band quit, is when the band quit playing. And the band was right, by the way. He was wrong. And so all of a sudden, here's this damn you, or something like that, to these kids. And I'm sitting there, and I was laying back in the stands and just kind of relaxing because I didn't have to conduct. And all of a sudden I sat right up, and the superintendent, who was sitting 2 people down from me, looked at me. It was Don Kelly. And Don Kelly goes, "Well, Bob, I think you better go take over." Just like that. And I said, "Yes, sir." And just about that time, and then he realized what he had done, and he ran out the door and into the band room. So I go out the other door, and I go in the band room, and here's this college kid, and he's crying because he knew he just screwed right up. So at that point, I didn't have a lot of patience. And so I just looked at him, and I said, "Look, first of all, knock it off. You're 22 years old." I said, "Second of all, wipe the tears away and get back in there. You aren't finished yet, and I'll go in with you." And so, "Okay, Mr. Rice." Off he goes back in there, and I sat there, and the kids look at me, "Mr. Rice, we didn't do anything wrong." And I said, "I understand. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it." So that was my little thing with him, and we got it straightened around. We're just fine.
Yeah. He, the class of, what was it, 2000? I'm trying to remember because we have yes, the class of 2000 wanted to do a special gift, and they commissioned a piece from a composer in his honor. Wow. And so Sagittarian dances, and then it was performed, at the spring concert, and we still have it at home, the first page of the score type thing. But to me, that says a lot.
Well, what he did, this was a gentleman from the state of Virginia. He was a high school band director in Virginia, and he no longer, shortly after that, he quit teaching and just went into writing professional and does a lot of music. And so he got a hold of me, and he said, after they had told me what they were going to do, and he said, "I want to do something here." He says, "Could you send me your school song?" And so I sent him "Go Arrows," which was our school song at that time. And I said, and he took the first 5 notes, and that came back in this piece, quite a bit of time. So it was written about our school song. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you real quick that when I came here, the school song was "Varsity," which is a University of Michigan song, which is not, I like it, it's fine. Okay, being a Michigan State grad, it's not because of that. But what happened was, slowly it went out of print. Okay, which means they quit allowing people to buy it. Oh. And so I never had a score. It was always just all the parts. Okay, because the people before me didn't have a score either. And so we played it for a while, and eventually the parts started, a lot of them were handwritten and all that stuff, and everything was going. Well, the third year I was here, 1975, Paul Balaam, who was the choir director here, came to me and said, "Bob, I wrote this song." He said, "Will you take a look at it?" And he was a U of M person, by the way. And he said, "I'd like to make this our school fight song." And so he gave me this piano score of what is now "Go Arrows," which is the school song now. And it was really kind of neat. It was original, which is kind of nice because a lot of people just play college fight songs, which is what we were doing at that time. So I had a good friend of mine who I'd been in the band with at MSU. He was a Forest Hill Central graduate, and he was a band director now. And he was, in fact, he came to Forest Hills because their band director took a year's sabbatical leave, and so he had taken over his high school band director's job for 1 year. And he was there at that time, and he was doing arrangements for the Michigan State bands. And stuff. So I went to him and I said, "I got this piano piece. Would you take a look at it and see if you'd be willing to do a marching band score for it?" So I gave it to him, and 2 weeks later he comes back and said, "Here, it's all done." And he hands it back to me, and so I asked him what he wanted for it, and he wanted $25. And I said, "Okay, if you'll make out a bill for it, I'll take it to my school board or my principal and get you the money." Well, to this day, by the way, he never made out a bill, so we never paid for it. Okay.
You never did.
And he, And he's a real nice guy. He lives out west now. But anyways, so that's how we came about to have Go Arrows as a fight song. Well, I took it. I took this thing to the games and we started playing it and people liked it. And so we had a pep assembly and taught everybody the words. Paul wrote all the words for it. And so we did all that. And several years later, I had Mr. Bancroft. He owned the business in Alto.
Yeah.
I can't remember his first name. His daughter was in band and all that stuff at one point anyways. And he came to me and he was a Lowell graduate. And he said, what would it take for you to play the old fight song? And I started going, Mr. Bancroft, I don't even have all the parts to it anymore. There's no percussion parts anymore. They're all gone. He says, I'll give the band $1,200. This is in the 1980 or 81, one of the two. Mr. Bancroft said, I'll give the band $1,200 if they'll play at homecoming. I said, for $1,200, we'll play anything,
What a great gift.
And because that was more than my band budget was at that time, okay? So anyways, so I went and got it, and there were like 5 parts that there were no parts for. So I sat down and started going in my head the different parts, writing them out, handwriting them out, and then I just made up a drum part for it because there were no drum parts. I made up a snare drum and a bass drum and all cymbals and all that stuff. And so at homecoming we played varsity, and he came into school the next day and handed me a $1,200 check. I bought a stereo system for us to record our concerts on at that point.
Yeah.
So the next
nice.
year he says, if you'll play it again, I'll give you $1,000. I said, okay. So we played it again. And then from then on, the rest of the time that I taught school anyway, at homecoming, we would always play varsity along with Go Arrows, okay? I just did it for and the alumni loved it. They would stand up and sing and all that stuff, So I thought that was really kind of neat, but we made $2,500 off him before he quit paying us. Which was, again, a lot of money to my band program at that time.
I didn't realize that. That
Yeah.
was so low. Now, when you were talking about the uniforms, because I remember the uniforms were very expensive. They were
Yes.
wool. Now, so you, as the band teacher's wife, you had to go get those all dry cleaned or what? How?
No,
Well, no,
no, I can tell you that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, first of all, while I was there, we ended up buying 2 new sets of uniforms, okay? One was in 1979 and one was in 1994, okay? And so in 79, I had a band parent, Phyllis Lessons, George Lessons' mother,
Yeah.
okay? Because all the Lesson boys were in band. In the point I was there, and their daughter had already gone through band before I got here. And so, if you didn't ever know Phyllis Lessons, she was a go-getter.
She was strong-willed.
I guess,
That woman, yeah.
trust me,
Extremely,
it's one of the
yes.
few people in this town I was scared of. Okay, and I love the lady. She was,
Yes, we did.
she's probably
Wow.
Yes.
just about one of my best band parents I ever had. Well, we were going to get uniforms, so I went to the school board and they said, I first of all, I got a friend of mine that worked for the Stanberry Uniform Company, and so I had him draw up. We got together and we drew up a sample of what uniform we would like it to look like, and then I went to the board meeting, and they told me, well, we could put in some money, but you're going to have to come up with like half the money or whatever. So Phyllis Lessons goes, don't worry about it. So Phyllis Lessons went to every store owner in Lowell and got them each to sponsor 1 or 2 band uniforms and pay for them. Okay. But she would stand there until they would say yes. If they said no, then she would start giving just all kinds of stuff. And so the other thing was she wanted uniforms for the middle school band. I wasn't the director there, and so she decided they should wear sweaters. Now the band director was Pat Covey, and she didn't really care if they wore sweaters or not, okay? But she decided she wanted them to wear sweaters. So she went into Don Kelly's office, superintendent, and said, and got all over him, and just basically sat in his office until he would say okay to buying these sweaters.
She was, yes.
Very good.
Because all I know is that
Yep.
the next day, which I didn't know she had done this, the next day I get called over to the superintendent's office. And so I go in and I get in there and he shuts the door. And he just looked at me and he goes, "Will you get that lady off my back?" And immediately I said, "Are we talking about Phyllis?" Because at that point I knew. And she goes, I said, and I said, "Don, if you think I can stop her, you're crazy. Somebody else is going to do that, not me." But every time I needed something, as long as her kids were in band, I went to her and she got it for me. Whatever it was, whatever it cost, she would always get it for me. And I always sat there and I was laughed and I said, "Geez, you know." So the next time we needed uniforms, of course she was out, her kids had all graduated, gone and everything. Then we did a whole thing of campaign in town, and we got people to sponsor uniforms, and then I ended up getting labels, and like inside of this uniform might say provided by Tina Siciliano, or provided by Dale Croft or whatever. And so I got people for $250 is what the cost of a concert band and marching band uniform together. So I got, we bought 250 uniforms at that time, and I think 100 of them got sponsored by it. It turned out, and what happened that year was, we are raising money for uniforms and everything, and that was the year the millage proposal didn't pass, and they laid off 25 teachers. I got laid off.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay, I was gone for half a year.
Half a year.
And so here it is, we're getting brand new uniforms, $57,000 worth of uniforms, and I'm not even working. So I thought that was kind of, I came back to work, and 6 months later, we got $57,000 worth of uniforms. Well, the school board kind of felt bad about me getting laid off, and came in and whatever we hadn't earned yet, they just said, "We'll pick up the cost." So I didn't have to earn the whole 200, a lot of, but I did earn, we earned probably almost half the much money. It was $20-some thousand we ended up getting.
Yeah, that included choir. So, I mean, there was a whole, at the time that he wanted to do that, and they talked about it, I ended up being talked into, "Okay, Lanie, you be music booster president for a little bit." So they're in my house, and here's Terry Raymer and stuff, and these people. "Well, why don't you just," and I said, "Okay, fine, guys, but we're going to get this job done."
Definitely.
We're going to get this job done. And I remember.
And it was the year we were moving, the next year we were moving into the new high school. Okay?
Yeah.
So we moved into the new high school, and a week after they moved in that building, all these boxes of uniforms showed up.
Yeah.
So it was like, and so it was, so our very first football game in the new stadium was with brand new uniforms.
I bet you that was.
And I cried.
Trust.
I cried watching that
trust me,
band come down.
Coming down that hill is a tearjerker. Doesn't matter what's
No.
going
Well,
on.
but
I just love that.
different people have different philosophies. My whole deal was, I came here, there were 90 kids in band, and when I retired, there were 250. Okay, and I don't say that I did all that. I had Jack Meisner, he really helped out for a while, and Dale Latva really helped out to build up the middle school band so that we could get the kids in high school. But it was a big deal to me. My philosophy was that I wanted kids to play, to get a chance to play, and even if they didn't go on to be in music in college or whatever, that's okay as long as they got a chance to play. Okay, and that was totally different than people before me. Some of the people before me had done. they were. I never had a band that got straight ones at state festival or anything like that, like Bill did. Bill had a different philosophy, and I had no problem with either one.
Right.
The guys there now, Tim Hahn has a philosophy similar to what Bill had, and the band's smaller, but it's got some better musicians in it. Okay. I had some good ones, but I didn't have a lot. So I mean, I had a lot of people that just kind of liked being in there and stuff. So that was a difference in there, and so.
And I want to say something because I'm sitting back as band director's wife going, okay. And so all of these years, he's been retired for a long time now. So we've gotten letters out of the clear blue, now social media, and then I'm on Facebook, posts. We've gotten kids that have stopped by. Well, Mr. Rice, I just want you to know, if it wasn't for you, I would have never finished school. If it wasn't for you, and I think teachers, all of us as teachers have those things, but there were so many. He and I, Diana graduated with one of her classmates is Ben Boggs. And so he has his band. It's very different kind of music. But he said, come on. So we got tickets. And so here's Bob and I going down to this last summer, downtown Grand Rapids to their venue. Yeah, and
What?
I
consider it heavy metal music. It's
we needed to have
louder and louder.
earplugs in, so. But it was extremely amazing to watch this young man and he gives him a lot of credit because his love for music, he could just go out and do it. It shine. And he has a story, about Ben in Christmas.
What? Oh, geez. Ben Boggs was one of my students, and he was in middle school. And Jack Meisner had just bought a brand new baritone sax, and Ben was playing it in the middle school band. And he and I were good friends, and we would go to Grand Rapids and do a lot of stuff together and all these things. And we came back into town. He was living in Lowell, and so we were coming back. I was going to take him home, and we get to the light in the middle of town. And all of a sudden, I'm hearing this Christmas carols on a saxophone. So we roll the window down and we look, and a block and a half down from Main Street was where Ben's family lived. His mom and their kids. And so here's Ben, and he's walking from door to door of his neighborhood with a music stand, setting it down with Christmas carols, playing Christmas carols on the baritone sax for all his friends. And Jack Meisner looks at me and says, I don't want that saxophone out there. That cost me that amount of money. We can't have. I said, look, the kid's having a good time playing music. Let's leave him alone and tell him on Monday you'd prefer not to do that anymore. And it was like, it was funny. And to this day, Ben was in the class with our daughter. He graduated with Diana. And he was always coming back and, to see us and stuff like that. And we went to this concert, and it was, actually his group was the best group there.
Musically, believe it or not.
But it was like, it was so loud. Lanie went out and bought earplugs for us. So I'm wearing earplugs, and I'm hearing everything. And it's just really loud. And Ben was a singer, and then he played saxophone. He played alto sax on a couple of pieces. Or tenor sax, I can't remember which now. Anyways, and I was surprised because he wasn't the best musician in the world when he was in band. But I was surprised he remembered how to play the thing. I mean, we're talking, he's 42 years old now.
Yeah, 42.
And so I was surprised he was able to play it, and he was really pretty good. And nothing real difficult, but it was, it was music I'd never heard because I don't listen to that kind of stuff. But it was kind of neat. And he came out and thanked me how many times. His mom was there, came to listen to him play because he lives in Kalamazoo now. And he has a group called Drink My Blood. That's the name of his group, okay? So you can imagine the kind of music they're playing.
You can look it up and,
But it was her
Facebook.
birthday, her mom's birthday. So we sat at the table right next to them.
And his twin sisters, Layla and Lila.
Layla and Lila.
Boggs were there too.
Yeah. Anyways, so it was That was one of them. The other thing with the ex-student, I would say, is well, I got a couple, several, but I like to drink, and I always like sneakers. I've known sneakers for a long.
So go ahead.
Well, I was in on a Friday night and at Sneakers having a couple beers after school, and with a couple other teachers. We're sitting at the bar, and there was a whole group of students, of ex-students, sitting up in the front at a big, huge table. And I found out later one of these students had passed away, and they were home. They had all come back from all over the country for his funeral, and so I'm sitting there and everything, and they're talking and all this stuff. And I was going to get up and go over and say hi and see if I knew any of them. It had been several years since they'd graduated, and this one girl kept looking over at me. And so, anyways, finally she gets up and comes over, and she says, "You're Mr. Rice, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And then she told me her name. And then she said, and she was a trumpet player for me. And she says, "I want you to know, Mr. Rice, I live in California now." And she said, "I put my cornet in the case when I graduated, and it sat there all these years." And she said, "I took it, but it went with me when I moved to California." And she says, "I am now playing trumpet in a group at my church." And she says, "You know, I didn't think much of it when I graduated." She says, "Now it's really a lot of fun." And so she says, "I just want to thank you because you got me going enough that I was willing to play this now." And so that really I almost teared me up at the time because she was not. I mean, she was my second chair player. She was a pretty decent trumpet player or cornet player, and so it was kind of neat. Real neat, in fact, to hear. Okay. My other thing is when I first came here, my first freshman class in 1973, Terry Raymer was in it. And then, I think next year, no, 2 years later, I had Nancy Raudebush came in there. Mm-hmm. And so the two of them kind of got together. And we're dating by the time that Terry was a senior. And so I was teaching a drum and bugle corps in Saginaw. And we were state champions for like 10 years in a row. I think from 73 to 82, actually. Yeah, just about 10 years. And it was a pretty decent group. And I was the brass teacher. And Nancy wanted to know if she could join, and so I took her in there for an audition, and she was a flute player, so therefore she asked to be in the flag line of the Strum Bugle Corps, and so she made the flag line, and so she got to do that, and this was a group that went all over the place. And in fact, they ended up going out to Colorado for the Drum Corps International World Championships. And they were in a Class A group. The biggest corps were in what they called open class at that time. And Class A was the next group down. And so that's what our group was. And right after that, they left there and went to Dallas, Texas to be in the VFW National Championship, and they won the VFW National Championship. Now a lot of the big, really good corps didn't go to those at this time, but it was still a big deal, and they had won. So she was in a national championship group, and she came back home after she graduated, and she said, "I'd like to." Anyways, she and Terry ended up getting married, which they still are. They live right over here. And
right up the street.
Actually, right up the street from you, right.
Yes.
And so she came to me and she said, "Terry, and I would like to start a flag line." I had twirlers, which is what they had here in Lowell when I came and stuff. So she said, "I'd like to start a flag line here." And I said, "If you can get enough girls together or enough people together to start one, you go right ahead." I said, "But you need to understand, I can't twirl a flag to save my soul, so I'm not teaching them. So if you want a flag line, you teach them." She said, "Well, Terry's going to help me." So I said, "Okay." So they started my first flag line here, and they stayed with me for 20 years. Okay, and that, then after I retired, I say graduated. After I retired from Lowell, they stayed with Tim for like 2 years, and then decided not to do that.
Well, they did the
anymore.
color guard here when that got started. That
Yeah.
winter guard
Well, yeah.
thing with Sharon McDermott.
Right.
That Terry and Nancy were involved
Yes,
with
they
that.
did winter guard here with Sharon McDermott, who was a middle school teacher, who had also been in that same drum bugle corps. And Sharon was really good at that, and she got some friends of hers come in, and in fact, Lowell won the state championship 2 years in a row for color guards.
That
And
shows you how much work went into it.
now they had disbanded it because Sharon just got tired. She's got kids now in middle school and high school, and she just said, I can't put in all that time anymore. And Terry and Nancy said, well, we're not going to do that now either. So they ended up this year for the first time. Lowell doesn't have one.
They don't have
But
Terry-
anyways,
yeah.
they worked with me, like I said, for 20 years. Never
What a
getting
gift.
paid,
What a gift.
showing up every time they could. Terry would come during his lunchtime when he was working for the Lowell Ledger at one point, and he would come over at lunchtime to work with the flags. And Nancy would come in after school and work with them because she had a job in Grand Rapids.
What a great
And,
power couple. Those
So
two
they,
take
oh
that
yes,
on and
they
do it.
did
are.
just
Great
tons of things for me. So
Well, Nancy would sew, and so she
would make all the
She
uniforms.
made the uniforms for the guard and the flags.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
had no idea.
I
Yes.
went to, believe it or not, Lowell at one time in the 60s had a drum and bugle corps. I didn't know this, but I found out all out. And so when we wanted to start a flag line, I went to the American Legion Hall to talk to somebody. I said, do you have any equipment? Like, for instance, flags and flagpoles and all this stuff. And they said, I think there's some stuff down in the basement. So he took me down in this basement, and it was, there were cobwebs everywhere. There's all kinds. Well, we found this box, and inside this box had 12 flagpoles and some old red and black flags. This group only kept going, I think, for 2 years. They did a couple parades, and that was it. And so anyway, so they said, you can have them. So I took them home, or took them back, and Nancy used these. They were metal poles, so they were heavy. And she put these old flags on them. Well, the first parade we were in, I marched the band down the street, and here's the flag line. We had 8 girls, I think, in the flag line, doing it with these stuff. And this lady comes running up to me. Where did you get those flags? And I'm going, American Legion gave them to me. I made those flags, and I don't want those in a band. I want that in a drum and bugle corps. And she was all upset. And I said,
Yep.
lady, you can have those flags as soon as this parade's over. I said, we'll make our own.
That's right.
So, and then Nancy was upset because they were so heavy, the girls had a hard time. Well, I was teaching the Saginers Drum Bugle Corps at the time, and they were getting ready to go on a 21-day tour. And so I had just stopped teaching them, I'm sorry. And so the guy that was the director of the group was a good friend of mine, and I went to him and I said, do you need somebody to go on tour for brass? And he said, yes. And I said, I'll go on tour. This one tour, and I said, in return, I need 16 flagpoles. Because they used the light ones,
Aluminum?
I don't know if they're
They were
aluminum or
aluminum,
it's
yeah,
something
they
else.
were.
Anyways, and so he says, well, we can't let the owner know because he doesn't like giving this stuff away. So he had a key. This corps had their own old schoolhouse in Saginaw. And it was a corps hall where we rehearsed in the winter and all that stuff in the gymnasium. It was like there was only 3 rooms. It was like the old school down here. Okay, but it was clean. We kept it clean and all that stuff, and the kids could rehearse there in the winter and all that. So that's where we kept all the equipment. So we went over there one night. He had the key to it. We went in there, stole 16 flagpoles, put them in the back end of my van, And I bring him back to Lowell so that Nancy could have flagpoles for the flag line. So it was funny because the next year, Bob Westkowiak was the guy's name that was in charge of the whole thing. And he kept going, where the hell did those flagpoles go? And I kept going, Bob, I don't know. And Dan, the guy that was the corps director, kept going, Bob, you know those kids, they just take them home and they forget to bring them back. And he finally dropped it. And
Yeah.
so in Lowell, here we are with new flagpoles, and then Nancy made all the flags.
Oh, man.
And so that's how we got to have that color guard anyways. I did a thing with Orville Jessup. He used to come to my band room all the time when I was first
Is
here.
this going? Okay.
And Orville, great guy. I really liked him, even though he was a U of M person. But anyway, and he would bring his recordings in of his band. They were on reel-to-reel tapes back then. And we would sit and listen during my planning time. We would listen to some of his band concerts and everything. And but Orville gave me the history of the band. Bruce Walters. Okay, Bruce Walters is the original band director in Lowell. And he also did an orchestra back then, way back. And he was here. Orville could not remember how many years he had been here. But he quit because he went into the lumberyard business, okay? And then that's when Orville got the job here. And Orville was here for 29 years. Although the last 5 or 6 years he did 4 or 5 years he did the middle school. He went down to the middle school because that's when they hired Bill Mills. Okay, and Bill was here for 6 years, and then they hired me, and I was here for 30 years, and now they hired Tim. So there's actually only been 5 band directors in the history of Lowell schools. And so it's really kind of neat. And Orville used to just, like when he got ready to move out of the house, his house over here on Jefferson, I think it was, he called me over and he had a bunch of old books. He gave me these old books, and some of them were on how to teach a drum major to do all this stuff. And then there was one old book, and it was kind of like this, only as big. And it was just full of manuscript paper. I didn't even know they ever made it. It was a hard-covered book full of manuscript paper. He said, you might be able to use this for something. Which I did. I ended up using it when I was writing out parts for different things. And so, but he was the nicest guy, and he would come over all the time, for that.
Passing and mentoring, I mean, wanting to still be attached. I'm just going to tell you, he is one that, the two of us have enjoyed music, and so we attend as many things as we can. And he is up to the high school. He goes up, and we take a ride around when they're doing marching band practice and talks to Tim and sees the show. And then with musicals, I mean, it's just, yeah. music in this whole community for, we're going on 45 plus years that we have lived here. So it's just, yeah.
Well, Lowell gave me a lot, so I don't mind.
Yeah, giving back.
I've always been a person that you take care of where you live, It's like,
that's important.
we've lived here
Well,
forever.
you both gave Lowell a big gift.
So.
I'm telling you right now. Lowell we're never going to let you guys go. I'm just letting you know right now. If you want to retire, you guys can grab a room at Snyder Manor. But you're not going to go anywhere because I'm going to tell you, Lowell, we appreciate you. I was never in band. I tried to get into band my senior year because I needed an extra credit. And I showed up with a kazoo, and I begged you. I said, please, I can play this kazoo like no other. And and the kindness that you gave me, you said, Tina, I would love for you to be here at band, but I don't have a place for kazoos. And I appreciated that because I knew that you were one of the teachers that us kids trusted. My dad was always busy with the city of Lowell, and when I had to go to, they always had the choir concert and the band concert the same night.
Yeah,
I'm walking down the street to get there because my dad was running late from coming back from a meeting. And I'm walking down the street thinking, okay, if I'm late, I'm late, you know, but I couldn't wait for my dad any longer. And you gave me a ride in there. You stopped and you said, aren't you supposed to be at the high school? And I said, yeah. I said, yes, but my dad, you know, and you said, hop in, let's go. You're going to be late, girl. So that, you know, like I said, there's a lot of kids out there that, yes, we appreciate your loyalty to us. And I'm going to tell you right now, we're loyal to you guys. If you guys ever needed help, if you ever needed your house repainted, definitely I would stick with the white and green because those are my favorite colors too. But we love and care about you, and you both are great people, and you're both kind.
The two of us, we love living on Monroe Street because it's like we need 700 pieces of candy at Halloween
Grand
time.
Central Station.
Oh my goodness
God.
sakes,
That's the
and we're out there.
busiest street in Lowell.
Totally. And so over all of these years, it's been, oh Mom, there's my teachers, you know, and then the high school kids will come later. Oh, hi,
With
Mr.
their
Rice.
kids.
Oh yeah, now this year.
Yeah, well, now I got the grandkids.
Grandkids, yeah, no, it's the grandkids. And two of my students had, you know, stopped by. Well, I don't know if you remember me. He had one of them had his hat on. Van Laan was his name. His mom was a Gerard. And so he lifted up his hat, and I'm going, oh my gosh. He said, I'm Tim, and this is my wife, and this is my little one. He says, we're out, you know. And so those connections, they never go away, but, you know, I just love them. And he tells me, I'll go to Meyer, okay. All right, well, I just got a couple things to get. Yeah, I'll see you in an hour and a half. Well, oh, Mrs. Rice, you know, and how's Mr. Rice doing? I mean, it's that kind of thing that just, it's just a part of us.
Well, you know,
always.
the real funny thing is, when I went to Michigan State in 1967, I graduated from high school, went to Michigan State, and we get to band camp, and I ran into this drummer, and I'm talking to him and everything. He says, well, my name's Roger McNaughton. And I said, my name's Bob Rice, you know, and he said, well, I live in a little town on the west side of the state. That's why I live in a little town on the east side of the state. So that was the first time that Roger and I ever met each other. And I never saw him again until Lanie and I were chaperoning the prom. About the third year I was in Lowell, and it was out at Cannonsburg, and Stillwater was the band that played. And we sat there, and they gave me a door. I was supposed to watch and make sure the kids didn't sneak out to smoke and all that stuff. So I'm sitting there at this door, and I'm looking at the band. I said, Lanie, that piano player just looks familiar to me. I don't know where I've seen him before, but he really looks familiar to me and everything. And finally, they took a break, and I went over to talk to him, and sure enough, it was Roger. And that's the first time I ever met Dale and all these people, because we had been at school, college together.
Yeah.
We were both in the marching band. I can't remember how many. He only stayed a couple of years, I think, but I mean in the band. But yeah, so it's funny how you meet different people different times.
Oh, I know. And the group played at our daughter's wedding and at Egypt Valley. We hired you guys to come out to do Diana's wedding. And
I went to Roger and I said, my daughter's getting married. Can you help me get a DJ? Well, why don't you have a band? I said, I'd love to have a band. I said, I can't afford a band. So he says, how much are you going to pay DJ? And I told him I budgeted this amount of money. He says, well, if I can get Live and Well to play for that much money, would you have us? And I says, well, hell yeah. And so he comes back the next day and says, okay, we're all set. And, you know, well, then we got to the thing, and all the people were having a great time dancing and all this stuff. And they got time for the reception to end, and they volunteered to play an extra hour, so we could all party a little longer. And we were going, well, first of all, they knew half the people there, because half the people were from Lowell.
Yes.
You know, and so it was a lot of fun.
Once again, that's a great example why Lowell communities.
Yes.
So
Well, I'm going to say the
Absolutely.
connections are there, and they don't ever go away.
No.
You're a part
never.
of them.
Yep.
Never
Like
go
this.
away. Well, I appreciate this interview with both of you, and I think I'm going to have to circle back and do another interview with both of you, because I want to dive deeper into who you are, Lanie.
Oh, well,
and,
okay.
and how
Okay.
how Bob Rice got to keep you all these years. You're just amazing. You're both amazing. But not saying that, but gosh darn it, thank you both.
You're
And
very welcome.
Lowell just loves you, and we're never gonna let you.
Well, the feelings. Yeah,
You know, we
right
were at
here.
one of a wedding reception, and one of those deals where the everybody's on the floor. Now anybody that's been married less than 10 years, go sit down. Everybody 20, and we were we had been married 44 years or something like that. So it ended up was us and another couple there. By that time, So the guy comes up to me and with his microphone, the DJ, and he's going, "Well, okay, tell me why. How have you made it 44 years here?" Da, da, da. And I said, well, "The secret to that is you learn to say yes." I said, a lot easier.
Perfect.
A perfect way to end.
Yes.
Thank you.
So
All righty.
All right.
The Lowell Area Historical Museum is proud to sponsor community oral history interviews. The Lowell Area Historical Museum educates, enriches, and inspires our community and visitors through the preservation and presentation of Lowell area history. For reservations and more information, contact the Lowell Area Historical Museum at 616-897-7688.